The sky was the color of a bruised plum, not yet blue. As Lena Whitaker guided her SUV along the empty spine of Summit Ridge, bare autumn trees clawed at the cold wind. Inside the car, the soft, intellectual drone of a podcast played, a stark contrast to the coiled tension in her gut. It was a tension she knew well, the kind that came from being in the wrong neighborhood at the right time. Suddenly, her rearview mirror exploded in a silent scream of red and blue. Lena's hands remained steady on the wheel as she pulled over. Her heart rate didn't spike. It settled into a low, familiar thrum. She hadn't been speeding. She hadn't run a light. She hadn't done anything but exist. The officer, a white man in his 40s with the easy authority of someone who had never at his presence questioned, leaned into her window frame. His sunglasses masked his eyes, but not his judgment. "Morning. License and registration, please." She provided them, her movements slow and deliberate, a carefully choreographed dance she'd been forced to learn. He barely glanced at them. "So, what brings you to Summit Ridge this early?" he asked, the question less a query and more an accusation. "Driving to work," she said, her voice even. His lips thinned. "Folks don't usually cut through this neighborhood unless they're up to something. You live around here." This was the game. 1,000 tiny cuts designed to draw a reaction. Answer too quickly, you're hiding something. Show frustration, you're aggressive. Stay silent, you're uncooperative. Lena played her part. "I work at the federal building on West 48th, she stated, offering a fact she knew he couldn't easily dismiss. He scanned her from head to toe. A silent, invasive audit. The unspoken question hung in the air. "Why would someone like you work there?" Lena met his unseen eyes without flinching, her stillness a shield forged in 1,000 similar moments. "Mind if I take a look inside the vehicle?" he asked. And there it was. The pivot point. The seemingly harmless question that was the beginning of a mistake he couldn't possibly comprehend. Lena let the question hang in the chilled air, a testament to his overreach. It wasn't a request. It was a test of what he could get away with. She turned to him, her expression a careful blank. "Is there a specific, legal reason for a search, officer?" she asked. Her tone wasn't defiant. It was precise. She was speaking his language, the language of procedure and law, and he clearly didn't expect it. His jaw tensed. "Just routine," he clipped out, his gaze darting to her back seat. "We've had a string of carjackings. Been asked to keep an eye out." Carjackings. Lena almost smiled. It was always something vague. Something that sounded just official enough to justify a report, but flimsy enough to evaporate under pressure. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Mounted discreetly near her dashboard, a federally issued dashcam had been recording since the moment his lights flashed. Standard protocol. No sudden moves, no negotiations. Just capture the truth as it behaves when it thinks no one is watching. Lena Whitaker worked in the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility. Her job was to hunt ghosts in the machine misconduct, policy violations, and the subtle abuse of power buried in paperwork. She had built cases against officers who looked just like this one. Some were cunning. Most were sloppy. All of them believed no one was looking over their shoulder. Ironically, she was on her way to a closed-door meeting about increasing accountability in suburban precincts just like this one. "If you'd like to issue a citation," she said finally, her voice like soft velvet over steel, "I would be happy to contest it formally." The officer stepped back, annoyed but now uncertain. His authority was being subtly challenged, not by aggression, but by competence. His hand hovered over his radio. He could escalate, call for backup, paint her as uncooperative, or he could fold. Lena saw the hesitation, logged it mentally, and then reached down. Not quickly, not in a threatening way. She pressed her thumb against a small, flat button beneath the steering column. A silent, encrypted ping was sent directly to Bureau systems, a timestamp, a location, and a signal that an encounter had crossed a procedural line. At headquarters, someone had just received it. He finally stepped back to his vehicle, making a show of running her plates, a piece of theater for an audience of one. He returned to her window, a hint of smugness back in his posture. "Everything seems to be in order," he said, but held on to her license. He nodded toward a black hard-shell briefcase on her passenger seat. "What's in the case documents?" "Mind if I take a look?" She met his gaze with unwavering silence. Her silence was louder than any argument. It was the sound of a system being forced to look at itself in the mirror. The tension stretched. This wasn't about a traffic stop anymore. It was about an entire history of them. Her father had taught her what to do when, not if, she was pulled over. Her brother hadn't been so lucky. A minor citation had spiraled into an arrest, a record, and a derailed life. This wasn't an inconvenience. It was a wound. Finally, with a frustrated sigh, he handed her license back. "Drive safe," he said, no apology in his tone. As she pulled away, Lena drove slowly, deliberately. She knew men like him always watched until they couldn't anymore. 5 minutes later, the guard at the federal parking garage recognized her instantly. "Morning, Agent Whitaker." The gate lifted. She parked, cut the engine, and sat in the profound quiet of her SUV. She opened a secure app on her phone and uploaded the dashcam footage directly to the Bureau's internal server. She tagged it "Unjustified Stop, Precinct 6A. Subject failed to cite legal cause. Showed resistance to procedural clarity." She didn't need to editorialize. The truth didn't always need to roar. Sometimes it just needed to be filed. The shift came not from a single dramatic event, but from a series of quiet, deliberate clicks in the machinery of the system. At 8:06 a.m., Lena forwarded the footage to Special Agent in Charge Thorne with a simple message: "Field incident. Suggest review. Possible pattern match. Thorne, a woman who valued data over drama, replied in under 5 minutes. I'll bring this to oversight. You okay, fine? Lena typed back. Just tired. By noon, her stop had been cross-referenced. It mirrored 2 others from the same precinct, both involving Black professionals, both recorded, neither formally reported. But Lena's case was different. She was one of theirs. And that changed the calculus. The second shift came from outside Lena's control. Around 1:30 p.m., the officer received a formal contact notice from a bureau liaison requesting clarification. At first, he didn't panic. But when he logged into the portal and saw the name, Lena Whitaker, his blood ran cold. He'd seen that name before, on a department-wide memo about racial bias protocols. His report was a masterpiece of omission, painting her as non-compliant and the stop as a prudent measure. It was textbook cover designed to disappear. The third shift came when the footage was played. At 4:10 p.m., the Bureau's internal review board watched in a closed session. They heard Lena's calm, precise voice. That's not caution. That's profiling. They saw the officer tap the trunk of her car. They watched her refuse to perform the script of fear and submission expected of her. The board watched in silence. Not because the video was dramatic, but precisely because it wasn't. It was chillingly routine. Lena never raised her voice. She never showed her badge. She didn't need to. Her composure, her knowledge, her quiet refusal to be intimidated, those were her weapons. The board made 3 decisions. First, they would audit the officer's complete stop history. Second, they would notify his precinct commander of a pending ethics review. And third, they would use Lena's footage in a new mandatory training module, Bias in Practice, recognizing the unspoken patterns. Lena found out the next morning. A sealed folder on her desk contained the memo. At the bottom, a handwritten note from Thorne. You did the right thing. The quiet work counts too. She didn't feel victorious. She felt measured. The weight hadn't been lifted, but it had been shared. The real justice wasn't in one officer facing consequences. It was in the emails that started trickling in over the next few weeks from other agents, other officers, from people who had seen the new training video. Thank you. I didn't realize how it looked until I watched it back. You held your ground. That means more than you know. One came from a Black sergeant in a neighboring county. He wrote, my niece drives through that neighborhood every morning. I used to tell her to keep her head down. Now I tell her to keep a dash cam running. It's not justice yet, but it's a start. Lena printed that one out. It was a reminder that what happened on Summit Ridge wasn't just about her. It was about the invisible script of power and fear written into the map of their city. It took a federal agent, a hidden camera, and a mountain of quiet endurance just to make the system flinch. She knew it wasn't enough. But it was movement. And sometimes movement is everything.